BlackRock is the single largest asset manager in the entire world, and that fact gives the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, unparalleled control over the U.S. economy and of the companies that comprise it. That's a pretty significant fact, given that Larry Fink has a political agenda that's at least as aggressive as his investment strategies. Vivek Ramaswamy has thought a lot about this. He is a tech entrepreneur. He's been in business and succeeded there, but he's also thought about the political ramifications of all of this and where the country ought to be going. He's the author of the book Woke Inc., and we're happy to have him on tonight. Vivek, thanks so much for coming on. So for our viewers who aren't familiar with Larry Fink and his agenda, if you could just sum it up for us.
Yeah, sure. So I think every American deserves to know who Larry Fink is. He is what I call the king of the woke industrial complex. As you said, he is the CEO of the world's largest asset manager. And what they do is they cause companies to bend the knee to woke orthodoxy because BlackRock says that we won't invest in your company unless you abide by these progressive standards. Or we'll dock the pay of a CEO or fire a CEO who refuses to bend the knee to woke orthodoxy. But here's the rub, Tucker. It is not their money. That $10 trillion doesn't belong to BlackRock. Say what you will about George Soros. At least it's his money. In this case, it is money that belongs to you, to everyday Americans in this country whose blood would boil if they actually knew the way their own money was being used to force a progressive social orthodoxy back onto them. That is the defining scam of our time. And I think it's high time that everyday Americans wake up to learning how their own money is being used as a weapon to advance values that they would find repugnant if they actually knew what was going on.
So to simplify it for the non-economists among us, including me, you invest money, you imagine this is your retirement. Larry Fink has influence over where that money is invested, and he invests it in ways that are repugnant to you and your core values and your family's future. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly right. That makes him the puppet master behind the scenes of corporate America. So when you wonder why the CEO of Coca-Cola or whoever does what they do, Larry Fink and BlackRock are a big part of that. But Tucker, there's one more part that makes this story even take a darker turn. The puppet master behind the scenes of BlackRock is, of course, China. There is no greater friend of China on Wall Street than Larry Fink today. He supplicates to the Chinese Communist Party. He actually helps them in trade negotiations here. While criticizing the United States and social inequity and injustice here, he is actually doing the bidding of the CCP at the same time while getting political favors from China. So I think this is something that the American people ought to know a lot about. His decisions affect the lives of everyday Americans more so than most politicians. And you know this. We're going through this thing that everyone calls the Great Reset, the stakeholder capitalism revolution, where we dissolve the boundaries between government actors and private companies to advance a single progressive globalist agenda. Well, I think it's time to reset the Great Reset, and I think the first step is to see with clear eyes what's actually going on, and Larry Fink's a big part of the story.
So we take moral lectures from people who work for a country that doesn't recognize human rights, and nobody ever points this out, because why?
Because they build a great Chinese wall that says you can't come into the Chinese market unless you bow down to the CCP, but they roll out the red carpet if you criticize the United States. And so these guys jump to whatever tune the CCP blows on a given day by criticizing the U.S., by supplicating to China, undermining our own moral standing on the global stage, and worst of all, in the case of BlackRock, not even doing it for their own account. They're doing it on the account of everyday retirees, everyday pensioners who really would be livid if they knew what was actually happening with their own money. Yeah. I think it's the defining scam of our time, and we're just beginning to see the beginning of it rear its head up. I think that there's an opportunity for a counter movement, though, Tucker. I think we need to reset that Great Reset, restore American democracy. You heard the left talk a lot about democracy. Well, part of democracy is actually giving everyday citizens a voice rather than letting elites like Larry Fink have their way by throwing their money around.
Man, I mean, and I should just say, you're not just a think tank guy. You're not a think tank guy. You actually have been in business your whole life, so you know what you're talking about. I hope you'll be part of whatever the solution is. Vivek, I appreciate your coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
We'll be right back.